So whilst the world burns, I thought we'd have a laugh, a funny video today. So I'm going to react to an interview with Liz Truss, the worst Prime Minister Britain has ever had. So let's get straight into the video.
I think Britain has become less democratic. Gazan immigrants are now allowed to go through the UK. Not a single politician made that decision. Everything that made Britain great is being destroyed by an establishment that hates Britain and hates the West. A man had
I told you it'd be funny.
his own children. He was not deported because of his right to family life. That I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
What can people do to try and change this?
There's an ideological war going on here. They've said, we want Sharia law in Britain. You can't really talk about this. If you...
That's all they ever talk about on GB News, the Daily Mail, right-wing YouTubers. And also the fact, it's such a talking point, like, they want Sharia law. Well, first of all, it's not happening, and they're not in power. Like, fair enough if they were in power, this may be a threat, but it ain't happening. It's just fear-mongering, it's racist lies, because they don't really have anything else to offer, just racist talking points, culture war stuff.
You say that these grooming gangs are primarily Muslim, you will be branded a racist. We need...
Yeah, because they are primarily white. We've got the data. The majority of grooming gangs in the UK objectively are white. So yeah, that is a racist lie. It's a racist trope. Because they don't care about... It just shows you they don't really care when white people do it. They just use it as a wedge issue to attack Muslims, immigrants, people that don't look like them.
To step up.
So nobody came to you and said, listen, these...
I wasn't Prime Minister for very long.
In weeks, you'd think someone would come to you and say, listen, we've got this grooming stuff going on.
That I am...
Grooming stuff of a certain race. Never white people. They don't talk about white people. And it's a sick thing if you think about it, because you should talk about it collectively. Why is race coming into it? Well, because they're racist. They don't talk... Like, why is it different when a white person does it? Does Andrew talk about this? Of course he doesn't. Because he's racist.
Resigning. Well, you would have thought.
Can you see why people are very disappointed?
Do you think that reform could get in, and would you be there with them, part of them? Your 49 days...
I felt like we were scapegoated. I was told that the audience...
Oh, poor Liz. They never take personal responsibility. They never. It's always someone else's fault. Like the Tories now. Oh, we had 14 years in power, but it was everyone else's fault but ours. They never take personal responsibility. And it's ironic because conservatism meant to be all about personal responsibility. But that's for other people, not conservatives.
with the Queen was going to be in Balmoral. I had no idea that 2 days later she would die. The last thing she said to me is...
The moment that you knew you would have to step down.
And I only did it because it was a gun to my head. Thank you. I was literally threatened.
Because you nearly destroyed the economy. Your mini budget literally created inflation. People's mortgages went up. It was a disaster by any measure of economic disasters. It was horrible. So yeah, you had to go. Like, you don't just get to do your extreme political experiments on a country.
How does that feel?
Bad. It felt bad.
Poor Liz.
The last 2 months, you guys have really listened when I've asked you to subscribe. Thank you so much. Now, the next step is to ask you on YouTube.
So manipulative. I hate people like that. You only listen when you do something I tell you to do. How manipulative is that? Like, so someone's not listening if they don't agree with you? This is such a right-wing logic. Like, oh, you're not listening to us. Yeah, we're listening. We just don't agree and we don't want to subscribe to your channel.
To hit the reminder notification on my homepage. Without that, you'll miss out on my videos, and we wouldn't want that. Make sure as well that notifications are set as on YouTube, or it won't work. If you're watching on Spotify, please hit follow.
Liz Truss, welcome to the show.
Great to be on.
When you became Prime Minister, you had a lot of ideas you wanted to implement. What were some of the main ones that you wanted to get in there?
So the main thing that I wanted to do is that Britain had been through a very long period of stagnation. Our economy wasn't
No, it was growing throughout 97 to 2007. Then the crash happened. And then you had some of the lowest borrowing ever, and you didn't do it. You just implemented austerity, which created massive stagnation, 300,000 deaths, and we're still seeing the impact of it today. So the stagnation was under you, Liz. It wasn't before. Like the economy, well, 70s, the oil crisis, and then you did have growth in the 80s, although there's unemployment, and then the 90s, you had growth starting, and then 2008, the crisis. And historically, how you get out of a financial crisis is not austerity. 1929, what did they do? They stimulated the economy. They built. They borrowed, because that's the only way you get out of a financial crisis that big. You didn't. You failed. And we're still seeing the impact today. But, it's other people.
getting any better. We'd had huge levels of immigration, so income
That increased since Brexit on your time period. I'm sorry. Again, increased immigration that the Tories led. Why not take accountability for that?
per head was going down in our country, and I wanted to turn that around by
But that's got nothing to do with immigration. That's to do, well, in the public sector, pay went down for various sectors like 25%. Is that immigrants' fault? Austerity? Cut public spending? You're going to blame immigrants for that as well, Liz? You can't just blame everything on immigrants. I know it's convenient and it works, but there is reality, Liz.
reducing taxes, or at least not raising taxes, getting on with things like fracking, because
I told you it'd be funny. I told you she's a laugh. She's a laugh a minute. Right, so taxes are the highest they've ever been under the Tories in decades. So the idea that the Tories, they always do this. Like, there's a myth that somehow conservatives in America and the UK are somehow prudent financially. No, they always increase the deficit. They always increase taxes. It's always the other side that have to come in and fix everything, like clean up the mess. You see this consistently throughout the last 100 years. So the idea that, oh yeah, Tories about low taxes, they're really not.
our energy prices were so high, it was massively damaging industry. And to me, that was the absolute key to getting our country back on the right track, because what had been happening is that services were getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. The defence budget was getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, because Britain just wasn't earning its way in the world. So that was my number one priority.
And you came up...
And why is that? Because you didn't stimulate. You didn't invest in the country. The Tories just cut. And then quantitative easing for the banks, where they did well, but everyone else had to pay for the disasters of the banks. Socialism for the rich and capitalism for everyone else.
Against just impossibility. It was just impossible. Barriers and things.
Well, the thing I came up against was a very powerful economic establishment who had essentially been the architects of the policy for the last 30 years and basically believed that if you keep putting taxes up, it will keep generating more revenue. They don't believe in the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is the idea that if you put taxes up too much, people will just stop doing things. They'll start moving out of the country. They'll locate their business elsewhere. So they didn't believe in the Laffer curve. And what had also happened is huge amounts of money had been printed, particularly after the financial crisis, but also after COVID, which had created an inflationary cycle. So I was faced with a group of people who did not share my fundamental economic beliefs, which is a belief in free market economics, supply side reform, cheap energy. I think cheap energy is an absolutely vital part.
I think most people believe in cheap energy, but it's how you get to that endpoint. Is it through renewables, or like you say, fracking, which has many problems? But again, her economic paradigm people don't agree with. It is too extreme. Just cutting taxes. Like, it's what Trump wants to do in America. It's favouring the wealthy at the expense of the taxpayer. I mean, that's what we see with the Tories constantly. It's the man at the bottom who pays, whereas the people at the top just get away with it. That's it. And she's quite blatant in her allegiances here. I mean, they all are. They don't care about the little man. But there's somehow, there's some people that are convinced. And it's genuinely sad to see that people believe that she cares about them when their mortgage rates went up, when tax rates went up under Tories, declining wages, stagnation of the economy, austerity. Why believe anything they say?
Of having a fast-growing economy, and they essentially undermined what I was trying to do.
Does that suggest we don't actually have a democracy because you elect a party and because they say they want to implement certain things, and then there are these unelected people who are in there stopping anything actually happening?
I think
So ironic when you talk about America, unelected people. Elon Musk, no?
Britain has become less democratic, yes. I think that there is less power vested in Parliament than there used to be, which is, of course, the centre of democracy. And there's a lot more power vested in quangos like the Bank of England or the Migration Advisory Committee or the Climate Change Committee. There's more
Is the Bank of England a quango?
power vested in the bureaucracy itself. So one of the things Gordon Brown did is he put the Civil Service Code into law in the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, making it much harder to fire civil servants, much harder to challenge civil servants. So over time, we've gone from a situation where the Parliament was sovereign, the Prime Minister had freedom of action. Of course, a Prime Minister could be removed by their MPs, but they had freedom of action, to a situation now where politicians are operating in a very tight space. And that also includes with respect to the law. So decisions now are...
So yeah, they famously did the bonfire of quangos in 2010, 2015. And there are problems with quangos. They have made mistakes. But essentially, how do we organise government? I think you need experts, and that's what quangos are, a body of experts that analyse certain policies. Are you just going to have one prime minister who kind of decides, like, let's say, stuff on climate? They may not know anything about the climate. They may have read a few books and a few studies. You need experts that have a deep knowledge of something that can actually build policy. So it's evidence-based, rigorous, and the best information. The Prime Minister, one person can't just have knowledge of healthcare, education. You do need experts at some point. But I agree, they need to be democratically accounted for. But what did the Tories do? Yeah, they get rid of quangos, but they could have replaced it with a better system. And they could have actually again, they didn't trust the experts. But the only reason they don't trust the experts is because they disagree with them. Because often they have, like with climate change, although I think Tories broadly do believe in climate change, it just contradicts their worldview. So they just want to get rid of them. And to be honest, she just replaced them with her own quangos that agree with her. That's what she wants to do. But she can't be honest about that.
Are judicially reviewed on a regular basis. So, the recent case where Gazan immigrants are now allowed to go through the UK, through the Ukrainian scheme to the UK, that has been allowed by the judiciary. Not a single politician made that decision. So decisions that used to be the purview of elected politics now sit in the hands of the judiciary, the bureaucracy, the quangocracy, and I think that isn't democratic.
That's a problem. And the main issue when I'm walking around, I know there are so many different issues in government at the moment and in politics and geopolitics, but everyone I speak to, they come up to me and they're concerned. I've never seen people so worried. It is mass immigration, particularly around Islam and Islamism.
Islamism? Is it? Is that true? Is that what people come up to you and talk about, Andrew? It's like everyone's like not like, get their kid in school, the rising living costs, they can't afford a house. It's immigration. Why is that? Because they're being told that's the problem constantly by people like him, GB News, even the BBC, they toe the line. Daily Mail, Daily Express, you constantly hear it. Immigration, immigrant. We've been going on it about for 100 years. Of course people are concerned because they're told to be concerned about this stuff. It's not natural. If you didn't have the propaganda pushing it on people, people would be more concerned about the wealthy and go, wait a minute. The wealthiest top 5% have pretty much most of the wealth, whereas us little lot down here have nothing. That's what they'd be concerned about. But no, it's all distraction from the real problems.
And I think finally we're allowed to sort of talk about it. There seemed to be a 10-year period where we couldn't, and it was more racist.
Oh, I told you it'd be funny. No. Just look at the front pages of the Daily Mail over the last 30 years at least. We've not spoken about it. I mean, Lord Rothermere in 1930s wasn't a supporter of Hitler. No, we're never allowed to talk about. We talk about it constantly, but we're never allowed to talk about immigration. They just never talk about it. They never talk about immigration. They never talk about woke, and they never talk about the left going too far. They're not allowed to talk about it, even though he's kind of talking about it constantly. But apart from that, they're not allowed to talk about it.
If you talk about it, what can people do if they, other than vote? What can they do to try and change this and make their country not, have some acceptable immigration, but not have it completely changing in the way it is?
So they do need to vote.
See the euphemism, the completely changing it. Vague, just vague posting, just.
Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change under this government, full stop. But I can guarantee that.
So we've got 4 more years of that, is it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Unless there's such a dire crisis that even Labour MPs decide to vote the government out. But I don't think that's very likely.
Actually, immigration has been coming down recently. And that necessarily it's not necessarily Labour. It will go up and down. There'll be peaks and troughs. But it is coming down. And Labour are probably desperate to do something about it because they are ceding ground to the right and going, yeah, we need to deal with this. It remains to be seen if they have a big impact, but they are doing something, and they'll probably do more than the Tories did.
I think they've got enough buffer. There's over 400 of them. They've got enough buffer. But not only do we need a new set of MPs voted in, those MPs have to be prepared to reverse what is 40 or 50 years of law. That's how serious the situation is. They essentially have to reverse most of the major laws passed for the last 40 or 50 years.
So what are what is like the main law or one of the main laws they have to
So
reverse?
one is the Human Rights Act. And this is...
One. It's the Human Rights Act. Yeah, everybody hates human rights.
The act that's being used. So even if an illegal immigrant has committed a crime, they won't be deported because of their human rights. So there's a recent case.
Yeah, bloody humans and their bloody human rights. Why would you ever treat a human? Because criminals are humans too, and especially if they're brown, believe it or not, like whatever your opinions are, they are still humans. Why should they be treated like humans? Just scrap the Human Rights Act, because that definitely won't have an impact on your family either. Like, they won't exploit that at all. No, don't. Trust them. Trust Liz Truss. The clue's in the name. Liz Truss.
Where a man had actually sexually abused his own children, but he was not deported, and the courts made this decision because of his right to family life. Now, I would have thought you waive your right to family life if you sexually abuse your kids, but he was not deported for that reason. So the Human Rights Act has...
Okay, so this is a question of there will be people who exploit the system. So does that mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater? So we just get rid of human rights now because there's bad people who do bad things? No, of course not. We need to really think about, okay, how do we deal with that? And obviously, he shouldn't be deported, but he should go at least to jail. I assume he went to jail. But she's using that as a wedge issue to go like, well, that means this scary story, which is a horrible story, obviously, that means we have to get rid of human. There's no logic to that. And it's a dangerous place to go because then you're just like, oh, we're revoking all these laws that were hard won. Human rights are hard won laws. They're not given. They're not given. We had to fight for them.
Has to go, and we have to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. Both of those things have to happen.
It's not
But
happening.
also, the Constitutional Reform Act 2005 has to be reversed, which will help make judges more accountable. So there's two separate problems. One is the law is wrong, but the other problem is that judges are now taking decisions that should be in the purview.
Law is wrong in your opinion. You're against human rights. But most people aren't. That's not happening. We're not revoking the Human Rights Act for many reasons. It's not happening, Liz.
Of politicians. And this was Tony Blair. Back in 2005, he created the Supreme Court, which had never existed in Britain before. He also took the power away from the Lord Chancellor to appoint judges.
Okay.
And I think this has been very important in terms of we now see a judiciary that is essentially self-appointed. They're not, the senior judiciary are no longer appointed by somebody in the cabinet. And I think that has broken the accountability in the system. So I think those are the two of the laws that need to be reversed. But, you know, in order to really do it, you need to reverse the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, which was passed, I think, in 2010 by Gordon Brown, which is the thing that puts the Civil Service Code into law, because I think you actually need to be able to appoint senior civil servants who are willing to do willing to enact the policies, you know, like what happens in America. So this is what I'm saying. In order to just fix that problem about immigration and dealing with illegal immigration, you know, I've just mentioned 3 laws that need to be repealed. It's more than that. You know,
But we have policies and standards for dealing with illegal immigration. I mean, it's there. I mean, but again, she equates stop the boats, refugees, asylum seekers with illegal immigration. It's a dishonest lie. She knows she's lying, but she has to like confuse it and conflate.
we could just spend the next hour talking about the laws that need to be repealed.
Do you think there's something inherent to the type of person who wants to become a civil servant that makes them likely to be maybe a bit of a box ticker and not to really think about the controversial issues?
I wouldn't put it like that. I think the civil service was conceived, you know, back in the 19th century. It was the Northcote-Trevelyan report that came up with the idea of an impartial civil service. And the idea was to stop corruption. But what has happened is over time, the civil service and the bureaucracy has accreted more and more power. And now they have either become a blocker to doing things or they're positively advocating a negative agenda, whether it's Islamism, and there's evidence of that happening in the Home Office, whether it's environmental extremism, whether it's transgender ideology. So I think over time, the institutions have got captured by some of these extreme ideologies as well. I don't think it's about the character of the...
There's nothing extreme about taking climate change seriously. The extreme view is to deny its reality. And the same with trans rights. It's not extreme to just identify how you want to. That's freedom, Liz. So, again, she just doesn't agree with it. It's like, oh, they've been captured. She'd be okay if these quangos, if these civil servants favoured her. It's just she disagrees with them. She doesn't necessarily care about democracy because the Tories would have done something serious about it if they did. So she's, again, just lying here.
The individuals, I've met good civil servants, I've met bad civil servants. The problem is they're just not accountable. You know,
Yeah.
and if the public can't kick out the people at the election who make the key decisions, then that is not democracy. That's the issue. So it's not a character assassination of any given person. It's saying that we've got a system problem here.
Do we also have, as I think you alluded to a little bit, an infiltration of maybe Islamism? I mean, we had recently somebody talking about.
He's obsessed, isn't he? Like, it's sad. It's just sad. Like, it's genuinely sad.
Blasphemy laws, and Keir Starmer just nodding along. We had somebody saying defending first cousin marriage, and this is the UK. Do we have that? Has there been an infiltration, like in Iran, like in Lebanon?
Well, there definitely is. Ideological. There's an ideological war going on here, and that is being openly pursued by some people, such as the 4 Islamic separatist MPs that were elected at the election. They've been open. They've said, we want Sharia law in Britain. We want Israel eradicated. But there has also been a more covert operation of saying to people, you can't really talk about this. If you say that these grooming gangs are primarily Muslim, you will be branded a racist. We don't really want to highlight that. We don't really want to.
Again, it is racist to say that. That's not true. It's a lie that they peddle to bash Muslims, immigrants, and non-white people. Why not be honest and look at it as a collective issue? They don't. They didn't. The Tories didn't implement the 21 recommendations of the J Report to actually challenge grooming gangs and the problems in institutions and the wider public. They don't care about solving the issue. Because if they did, they'd put this money, the resources into the police service, the safe houses for these victims. They would take it seriously. But she doesn't. What was she going to do about it? Like, her priority wasn't the victims. It's never about the victims. It's about bashing certain groups in society. Because, again, they've got an agenda. Who's the scapegoat now? Muslims.
Go after these cases. So I think there's a combination of an ideological battle, a fear of being seen as racist. There's also an element of political expediency, of people wanting to get the Muslim vote and being concerned if they are speaking out.
I was wondering where she was going with that then. I thought she was going to the political expediency of just bashing immigrants, because that historically has been very potent in terms of getting power. Well, she knows that. That's how the Tories won. Oh, we're going to reduce immigration. Immigration. Did they reduce immigration? No.
Against these issues. And then there is there's an infiltration of institutions as well. Mm-hmm. So all of these things are true.
Was that ever something that came up in meetings while you were PM? Were there people even from other countries, other prime ministers and things saying like, gosh, you've got a bit of an issue in the UK?
During my time as a minister for 10 years, mm-hmm. and so I was a minister in education and that type of issue.
See, the fact that, what do you know about education, Liz? Like, you're talking about democratically, but what do you know about immigration? Like, has she got a degree in education, a master's in education? I've got a master's in education. I know about this stuff. Why should she be allowed to run the education department with no experience of education? Again, she won't talk about that, will she?
There were concerns about some schools. There were concerns about with what the Home Office was doing. If you remember, there was a big row over the Trojan horse issue. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, we worked very hard to push back against any schools where we thought that type of infiltration was going on or that miseducation was going on. I then went to work in a bunch of jobs that had nothing to do with it, frankly. So Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Trade, Foreign Affairs, and you just naturally spend your time talking about, quotas of beef or right. what the rules are going to be on, products of origin. So you're not.
Yeah.
And I think this is the other thing about government is partly because the system is so difficult to navigate. If you're in a ministerial job, You have to spend 100% of your time playing a game of whack-a-mole to get the stuff you're trying to do through. You don't really have the broader vision of what's going on elsewhere. But, I remember.
Okay, we'll end it there because they just go on about the grooming gangs because they're obsessed with it without having any solutions, without actually taking a broader view of the problem and just focusing in on a certain group as opposed to actually going, right, how do we seriously deal with this? Should we take it seriously? Should we look at the J report, look at the other studies and take action? But they're not interested in action. They just want to talk about it because it means that they don't have to take action. They don't have to take the issue seriously. So on that depressing note, I'll see you in the next video.